Hello, my name is Beko Pin, and you are watching Rappler. Welcome to Newsbreak Chats, where we feature the latest, the hottest investigative, in-depth, or explainer stories, or nerve stories, reports in this case, that our reporters and researchers jointly work on. Today, we focus on a study done by Nerve on the information ecosystem in the United States. We talk about this at a critical moment. The study was published in June 2024, but it's timely nonetheless, especially because in just a few days is D-Day, or when the US picks its next president. Joining us is Don Kevin Apal, Head of Data and Innovation for Nerve. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, for our viewers, what is Nerve?
So Nerve is so we're actually based here. So it's a data insights consultancy. So we are actually the official data partner of Rappler. So we work very closely together. We specialize in mapping information ecosystems, paano ba nag-flow yung information, the platforms, where are the narratives coming from, how are they distributed. So these are things that we study a lot and geek out on. And we also, spend a lot of time studying this information network. So a lot of our methodologies actually nanggaling siya from Rappler's own investigations and expertise when it comes to the platform. So yeah, that's what we do. We're a data insights consultancy, and we've been doing research like this for various markets already.
Right.
So here in the Philippines, we work with Rappler for its own information ecosystem research, done other countries in Asia and Europe as well.
Yeah, one of the latest, or at least that I'm familiar with, is the research on yung atin ito, the Chinese disinformation. Pero yung tanong dito, siguro yung tanong ko sa'yo, is why study the US information ecosystem?
So it wasn't naman our first study in the US. So we've been doing ecosystem studies also in various other markets. But we thought this one was particularly important because of the elections that's happening in the US. And as you know, and as we know very well here in the Philippines, information integrity is election integrity. Diba? So it's hard to parang claim democratic integrity when yung information environment mo and your voting population is so parang exposed to this information, when the information ecosystem is so corrupted. No? And I think also this year, and I think you'll agree with me, this is a very contentious election period for the US. They're discussing topics like abortion, immigration, and then conflicts outside the US, like the war in Gaza, for example, and Palestine. So these are really big topics, and that will be discussed and are being discussed in the process of the election there. Pero yung implications nila goes beyond the US, diba?
For sure.
And anything naman that happens in the US because of because of US being the US, may far-reaching consequences talaga siya. It comes to politics, trade, stability. So I think it's really also very important for us here to understand.
I mean, especially if you're watching Newsbreak Chats, you would probably already know this, but spell it out loud, no? Especially in the Philippines, in terms of security and defense, whoever leads the US, whoever's in the White House, spells a world of difference for us here in Manila. But before we deep dive into the actual results of the study, by the way, you can download it for free in full. It would make for a really good long weekend read. I'm supposing 100 pages. May mga graphs naman. Hindi siya pure text. Over 100 pages. If you want to geek out over that over the weekend, please, we will be linking you sa story page siguro nito, the full report. But before we jump into the results, or the conclusions and the findings that you have, how did you even do this study in the first place?
Yeah, so what we did is what we're trying to do kasi is a very comprehensive look into the information ecosystem. So it covers a lot of things from the cascade of information to how people consume information, diba? Where do they get their news, etc. So it's a mix of both, parang ang tawag namin sa research, unstructured and structured data. Pero TLDR, we just really look into all the ways that people get and distribute information. So we look into social media, which is very big right now, the news, etc. We look into how particular contentious topics are being discussed within these platforms, how they're being consumed, how they're being distributed, sino yung source of this information mo and how is this information spreading also. And then we compounded that with the national survey that we run in the US also, that ran around February, so the insights were covered that period. So we asked them about, okay, where do you get your news?
Right.
Diba? Saan ka, about, for example, particular topics like abortion, immigration, where did you get information, diba, around those topics? Anong platform, etc. Those things were, we asked Americans, no, from different states. So, yun yung analysis niya. It's a pan of 3 years worth of data. And then the way we also, nag-zoom in din kami sa tatlong topic.
Yes.
So the way we did that was we look into everything that's been published in the last 3 years. Ano yung pinaka-talk about, ano yung pinaka-contentious. Ano yung napili namin. Na I think naging key critical issues din siya in the US had been, yun nga, abortion, immigration, and then Israel-Hamas. No? So we zoom into those in terms of how it's being discussed in the US. And that's how we did the analysis.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Those 3 topics absolutely dominate yung discourse, both the deep kind and probably the propaganda kind in the US elections now. Also, for the appreciation of our viewers, how long does it take to conduct a study like this?
For this one, it took us, matagal lang kasi mag-survey, but I think it took us around 3 months to finish the, most of it is data collection.
Yeah.
So 3 months yung actual, and then of course we have to run it through peers and then present it to people who could vet what we wrote there. So yeah, around 3 to 4 months. Yeah.
So for our viewers, it takes that long.
It's very long
to get data that and to make sense of the data.
And it has to be
a
holistic view kasi. It cannot just be an exploration on. It cannot just be a survey. We think.
Yeah.
On media consumption habits, because we also wanted to parang look into ano ba yung nagda-drive ng habit na yun. Diba? So it's very important to be looking at it na holistically.
Macro, micro.
Yeah.
Nabanggit mo kanina, one of the things that we learned about is where they get the news. One of the findings that, and again, you can download the entire report the report in its entirety, but there's also an article version. So if you want to, like a Cliff Notes, a summary perhaps of the report, you can also check out. It's on Rappler, right? Yung parang article version of it. One of the things that struck me is that the Nerve study found out that younger consumers in the US get their news from social media. That's not surprising. Yeah. But that they do trust a lot of political news from social media, which frankly, hindi ako nagulat pero parang na-confuse na ako ng kaunti. Kasi you would think that the youngest news consumers are Gen Z. They grew up on social media. I would assume siguro na parang baka jaded sila or baka meron silang weariness about trusting the news that they get from social, especially if it's political, di ba? So can you walk us through that finding and its implications?
Yeah. So what our study found was that yung younger, kasi tinanong namin everybody from different age groups. We asked them, okay, where do you get your news? And then where did you get information about these very particular topics? Like, yun nga, the 3 topics I mentioned earlier. And what we found out is very different talaga yung habits mo across age groups. Particularly the youngest segments, your 18 to 34, ganyan. They're so much.
Youngest pa pala tayo.
Pasok pa tayo. So they're very and heavily, and actually the younger they are, mas heavily reliant sila on social media, no? Not just for news, but a whole bunch of other things na sobrang it permeates their lives talaga.
Therapy.
Like that's true. That's one. Kasi we also ask them, what do you use it for, diba? And yung older segment mo, they would say, we use it to connect with family and friends and to get updates. Mostly ganun. The younger ones talaga, it's for entertainment, for research, for discovering products. So it's a big part of their lives. No, but yung tama ka dun, that wasn't very surprising to me. Mas surprising sa akin was when we asked them whether or not they trust political content they see on social media. Because again, this is a generation na they grew up on social media, but at the same time, ito rin yung laging hindi naman nagkulang sa warnings about you know the dangers of social media, the problems there. Kasi ang difference niya is talagang I think almost half of them, like 50% of them said we trust the content we see on social media. Medyo baliktad siya dun sa a majority of them said that they trust the content that they see on social. No? Baliktad siya dun sa ibang segments where they don't. That's 50 over, kasi the rest is parang they're not sure. So 20% lang yung nagsabi they don't really trust the news, yung don't distrust. So yung problematic doon and what makes it potentially problematic would be yun nga, because when we examine these platforms, they're riddled with a lot of problems pa din. Matagal na namin na-mention, information operations, manipulation. They're designed kasi to prioritize engagement. These platforms and algorithms, they're designed for engagement, not to keep you informed, but to keep you engaged, diba?
Keep you angry or to keep
you angry.
Happy in your little bubble.
Okay. Yeah. And there's also a lot of tendency to parang surface hyper-partisan content versus factual journalism, diba? Hyper-partisan actors versus journalism, content creators doing news, etc. Pero meanwhile, for example, in YouTube, for example, we look into the news space on YouTube. Kasi a lot of them said, they also get news from YouTube. Tinignan namin, ano ba yung mga news on YouTube? And 50% lang nun actually came from journalists like you. The rest are content creators, doing news as well. Which is a bit problematic because, yung content sa mga sources na yun, they don't go through the journalistic process. No? So, medyo concerning for me yung implications niya because without a more siguro robust media literacy framework, or if you don't teach them to be more scrutinizing of what they see on social media, there's this risk of them being manipulated or having their perceptions, their choices be shaped by hyper-partisan content or even disinformation, which is problematic going into the elections.
Parang by content that the algorithm knows will bait you.
And
so it will bait you even more. Yung follow-up ko dun is, again, I may be wrong, I may be right, yung presumption na, like Gen Zs and even older and even younger millennials, right? Parang you would think na parang we would be parang vaccinated na tayo sa traps na ito. But it seems that yung pagiging babad natin, so I'm not saying, hindi na nila, kasi kasama dama yung millennials yung pagiging babad natin sa social media is in fact a vulnerability for that age group. So, and this is funny because we already talked about this offline over the weekend, no? Is there no widespread awareness na the algorithms don't really serve you well? Not necessarily.
So, before I answer that, digital savviness kasi doesn't equate to media literacy. The younger generations definitely so much more adept at using these platforms, navigating these platforms. They're so good at it because they grew up with it, diba? Sila nga yung, pag nalilito yung matatanda, diba? Sila yung nila.
I find myself asking younger people to help me navigate as well.
But they can still be susceptible to manipulation on social media, no? And so yes, I do think naman there is awareness of the dangers of social media. Parang wala naman din silang choice kasi they're constantly reminded of that. Dami namang hindi man nagkulang sa news reports about the dangers of social. I think schools also highlight those already. But it's also like asking kasi na parang, does the fish know it's wet? Parang ganun. Because this is a generation that lives and breathes on social media, di ba? So, and on social media, yung manipulation and emotionally charged content are so normalized na, diba? Sobrang normal na siya. It's the everyday thing already. So how do you even realize na na-influence ka na pala in that kind of environment, diba? So yes, they're digital savvy for sure. But I don't think they have the capacity, or at least a lot of them have the capacity or the tools to really critically assess and question the integrity of the content they see on social media. Diba? So iba pa rin yun . And it's very problematic kasi we're letting these algorithms designed for profit again to really shape what they see and believe in. And as we've seen in the study, the platforms still continue to incentivize sensationalist content, and then it's still more focus on ideological alignment rather than the facts. Diba? It's really grouping us into different tribes pa din, no? So there's still a lot of echo chambers there. And then there's that what we said earlier na parang the sheer volume also of the unvetted content from non-journalistic sources talking about news, trying to explain news.
Right.
They outnumber or out-engage.
Yeah, for sure.
Kaya
dito sa Philippines,
Diba? And but at the same time, 6 out of 10 of the youth we ask in the survey still say that their primary source of information around those key topics was social media. Diba? So
very interesting dichotomy na parang there is parang may theoretical awareness na I shouldn't be trapped in the algorithm, but at the same time it's so hard to escape the algorithm when it's an integral part na siya ng buhay natin. No?
Kasi yun lang, hindi lang naman kasi siya for news ginagamit ng mga bata, diba? It's also for, a lot of things. Entertainment, connecting with friends. So it's also very hard to disconnect.
Right.
But, at the same time, the problem is still there. And also, I think tama yung sinabi mo kanina also, baka din yung perception of them na dahil digital savvy ako, I know my way in social media, I will not be manipulated. Maybe that confidence is also contributing.
I mean, like, speaking for myself, at my big age of 33, I know for a fact that doom scrolling on Reels is not good for me. And yet, I find myself spending embarrassingly long time. Reels na yun, hindi pa nga yung TikTok at this point. Like, the algorithm isn't as, I would think, right? The real algorithm is not as adept as a TikTok algorithm in baiting you in. But I mean, diba? Despite my discussions with you, despite reading these studies, you still find yourself hooked into the algorithm.
They're also very addictive. Most of the studies show that social media is also very addictive. And I think siguro yun nga, nandun din kasi yung andun din kasi yung sa how a lot of the youth din kasi so because they think they're already very digital savvy, diba? Pero not a lot of them naman questions din talaga kasi they're so used to content curated for them by algorithm. They're so used by algorithm. They're so used to getting information served to them rather than intentionally finding it.
It's not just the change in social media. It's change in how you think actually.
Diba?
The news comes to you.
We very rarely question that Kasi nga sobrang sanay ka na, lumaki ka na curated na yung content Pero bihira yung nagka-question na bakit out of the many content out there, this was served to me? Bakit ito, di ba? And who decided that I should be seeing this? And wala rin nagka-question on what am I not seeing? Di ba? So that's I think contributing to the problem also.
And this is my opportunity to also plug the Rappler app if you want to escape the algorithm, but we'll talk about that later on. Let's jump from social media to yung very real problem in the US of local or community localized media. The Nerve study specifically emphasizes the role of local television and how in the US, because of consolidation, coverage has turned more national and then skewed partisan due to that corporate decision. And I think on that note, then it's very important to have community coverage, right? To pay attention to local issues. So, in the US context, what are the implications for an electorate that is already very, very divided right down the middle, right? Yung latest numbers, parang basic, experts won't use this, but I'll use it. Like, siguro yung parang almost calcified na yung division in the United States. So, what does this do to that current state of US electoral politics?
Yeah, I think yung TLDR nun is really just a lot of more, talagang mas people really just flock to polls na rather than being more open to the gray areas when it comes to issues, diba? So yung findings kasi namin dyan, so kanina we dove into social media kasi the youth is especially immersed into it. Pero for the older segments naman, ang difference niya is they still largely rely on the local TV news, diba? For news, no? Pero yung sabi rin namin, yung argument din namin doon is the TV industry in the US also has its own issues. So for everybody's context, the US used to have one of the most diverse diba? Diverse media ecosystem in the world. Diba? Sobrang hindi problem ang ownership dati kasi ang daming independent media.
And they would survive.
From across the spectrum. Yeah. But lately also because of a lot of problems then hounding the press. The similar here. They're closing because they're unable to retain revenue. The digital platforms are getting all the ad revenue. So nagko-close na rin yung mga thousands have been closing in the US, no, na community newsrooms. And to survive, a lot of those newsrooms, ang nangyayari is, syempre, nabebenta sila and nagkakaroon ng mga buyout from the large conglomerates, media conglomerates. They buy out the stations. So, ang nangyayari, imbis na diverse yung media industry, marami pa rin naman news stations, pero pare-pareho yung may-ari. Medyo similar here, di ba? Nagko-consolidate din, di ba? And medyo problematic yun because, ang nangyayari, you have like, for example, may 3 kang major conglomerates in the US. They each own like 200 stations each, di ba? And then ang problem mo doon and this didn't come from us, we cited another study who studied the local news environment there. Ang tendency daw is one, syempre pag binili ka na ng talagang media conglomerate, ang focus niya usually national politics and to save din kasi ang hirap mag-fund ng shows na sobrang localized. Imagine ko 200, may 200 kang iba't ibang show na ito.
Money to...
So ang ginagawa nila, like for example, gagawa na lang ako ng isang show, isang national TV show, and then papalabas ko sa lahat ng station, di ba? So nangyayari, nawawala yung coverage mo ng local politics. Parang dito rin, di ba? Kung ano yung kumukonti yung nagko-cover ng politics in the provinces, lahat na lang, it's all about the presidents, the senators. It's the same in the US. Nagiging masyadong focus yung coverage to the national politics, which can be very dividing. So sobrang dividing ng national politics, no. And then second, may mga concerns din about the shift to hyper-partisanship. Of course, may mga hindi pa contentious pa naman siya na claim. But at the same time, may real fears kasi one of the biggest conglomerate was Sinclair. This is controversially conservative. And then I think in 2019, yung nag-spark ng issue na to was they made their whole lahat ng affiliates nila they made them read the same script diba, na that condemns fake news ganyan, a very conservative script. So may ganung about control, and some studies have also shown na baka daw na parang nag-shift daw after they were bought out. Nag-shift yung coverage to partisanship, which is a valid concern. Of course, there has to be we'll have to look into this further, pero it's a very valid concern because suddenly nawawala nga yun yung importance ng independent media. Suddenly when you're bought out and the local voices, suddenly you're beholden to your bigger your mother corporation or mother company. So there's that question of independence also in the local industry, which is problematic kasi on one end you have social media that's also corrupted, and the other one na
ito na sana yung option mo to break out of the algorithm, no?
Yeah.
But in a way, it's also curated because of how
of ownership.
The structure.
Yes. And medyo problematic din yung difference ng dalawa kasi that's why also I think nagwa-widen din yung divide. The sources of the younger ones are very different from the older ones. Diba? So that's why also I think that a lot of sobrang fragmented nung consumption habits natin. We used to, nung mga bata tayo, isang TV tinitignan natin.
Correct. At the same time, tune into the same news.
Diba? Ngayon, kanya-kanya, everything is personalized, even down to the shows that you watch. Dati, sabay-sabay, pinag-uusapan natin, Meet Your Garden.
Correct. No, totoo.
So everything, even news, has become so fragmented and personalized that that's why it's also harder for us to parang agree.
I mean, like, on a personal level, like, because I teach, and then my students sometimes are surprised perhaps that the news items that I am attuned to are not the news items that they are attuned to. And I had to remind them that it's because well, I don't rely on algorithms because I have no choice because I work as a journalist. So but like you are unfortunately beholden to your algorithm that only feeds you what it thinks you're interested in, or it thinks you need.
What it thinks you're interested in.
Diba? Okay, yung isa din na insight, I guess, from or parang another concern that came up into my mind while I was reading the report. In a way, yung 2024 race sa US, no, parang the Democrats and the Republicans, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, kind of acknowledge na the US is in a mess in the sense that, and it's in a chaotic moment in the world, right?
Yeah.
Again, issues regarding immigration, abortion rights, external wars, especially the war Israel, Gaza, Palestine.
Yeah.
Pero in a way, very divergent yung messaging nila. Si Trump recently called the US the garbage can for the world. And so he presents himself as sort of a savior. Very reminiscent of one Rodrigo Duterte. But
we have our own savior.
we also we had our own savior who was recently in the Senate. But anyway, si Kamala naman, yung fighting message niya when she kicked off officially her campaign, di ba? When we fight, we win. So parang it's this message that we can work on this together. I would imagine yung effort nun is to bring together a very divided America. But the question is, how can you bring together a divided America when, to begin with, parang sa social media pa lang,
hiwalay na kayo.
Hiwalay na. We can show, I think we can show a graph that shows just how divided the US, and this is, for better or worse, eerily similar to a chart that would plot out the Philippines as well, right?
This is just for one conversion. This is a map on abortion, diba? The conversation about abortion. And you can see here, cluster kasi sila based on similarities on what they share, etc. So magkakasama. Usually may tendency kasi, since ideological alignment is parang amplified on platforms, that nagka-cluster yung mga pareho yung the way they think. So you have your right, your conservative Republicans, and you have your more liberal audiences in the middle.
We're showing the graph here. So parang, can you also explain to us, bakit parang mas malaki si blue and green? Green is mas not so hyper-partisan, tama ba?
So the green is mostly mga news clusters yan eh. So nandyan yung mga news. So they're consumed kasi by both, but more by the blue ones, no?
Right.
So kita mo mas dikit sila sa news kasi nga your left networks, you know, they tend to still be naman kahit papaano mas may trust pa rin sila with media. Right? So and it's the same here. We've studied the Duterte networks, the Marcos networks. Ang hirap-hirap mag-penetrate doon yung mga news. But for the left communities, they tend to pa rin naman, no? To still consume news, no? Pero siguro yung medyo challenging dyan would be if you look at the red one here, it's the right-wing echo chamber that actually overstudied na yun, and dami. There's a lot of study around right-wing, but it's so well entrenched and insulated na siya.
It's very small, a tight bubble.
No, it's not necessarily because it's smaller, but it's mas it's tighter because they all get from the same sources. It's the same source. It's very select. No, they get yung main source nila are typically hyper-partisan media. Some, as in noted, ng disinformation sources like Breitbart, diba, Gateway Pundit. So yun yung may mga preferred sources of information sila while completely rejecting everybody else. The media, because they don't trust the media.
Is there a way to penetrate those, to escape and penetrate those silos?
It's very hard. It's very hard because in the first place, parang the platforms are designed to keep it this way. Diba? They're designed to present kasi to you the content that you would most likely engage with. So hindi siya masyadong walang intention from the platforms to really
kasi
help you break out of this echo chambers, unfortunately. Because they get more engagement also. Within this silo, hindi naman nakita namin. These communities, they're insulated from news, they are, and opposing view, hindi nakakapasok yung mga opposing views dyan, or bihira. And then when we did the mapping, you can see that their sources are all hyper-partisan, news orgs or alternate news orgs. And then even the outright disinformation actors. And then there's yung narrative sa loob, sobrang laki ng distrust on media. I think part of it is also kasi yung mga conspiracies mo, and then even Trump, they like to vilify the media also. No? So wala na rin yung trust. And then within these echo chambers, continuously nire-reinforce lang lahat ng gusto nilang marinig. Like, that's why dyan nabubuhay yung mga conspiracy theories.
It's never challenged.
They're not challenged, etc. And so when Trump presents his narratives to the world and to this parang audience, he's already presenting it to our already deeply parang entrenched beliefs Audience with a belief, sobrang convinced na sila.
Kumbaga na-reaffirm lang.
Sobrang strong na ng belief nila. And you can say a lot about Trump, but he knows his audiences really well talaga.
He knows how to make the most out of what they already believe in.
Yeah. That's why yung rhetoric ni Trump actually really appeals directly to the fears and grievances within this chamber. He knows those
Right.
Alam nila yung mga pinag-uusapan dyan. When we look into those, pinag-uusapan pa dyan, nagpa-persist yung mga theories about great replacement theory. Familiar ka doon? There's this whole theory na parang papalitan daw sila ng
white.
pinapalitan daw sila ng mga migrants, di ba? And kinukuha daw yung mga resources nila.
Which also explains his inflammatory language.
Yes, towards
immigrants, whether legal or illegal actually.
One of the narratives pa nga doon was, they're bringing in migrants so that, kasi voters sila ng
I remember that. I remember that theory.
Pero nagper-persist ilang beses nang fina-fact check yung mga ganun, but they persist within these networks.
Because the fact checks also don't penetrate.
Yes,
and even if it does, hindi sila maniniwala.
And kasi nga, they don't trust you. You're parang Pilipinas lang, di ba?
Yeah.
Sounds family.
We've seen this film before.
And the narrative is an us versus them. It's a very tribalist narrative na kaya din sobrang strong nung that is the strength of the right-wing network also in the US. They have a very strong parang feeling of we're in this together kasi we have a common enemy.
Yung enemies within.
Yes.
Rhetoric.
So it's a very us versus them mentality. So to his benefit, to Trump's benefit, yung right-wing network mo, they tend to be so much more homogeneous also, and they have the same stand when it comes to issues. They agree on abortion, they agree on immigration, they agree on the Gaza one. Baliktad sa Democrats they tend to be more divided on issues, which is to be expected of more liberal voter base. Ganun din naman dito. And I think that's why also, like you said, si Harris is trying to strike a unifying tone. Kasi ang extra challenge for her is kasi sobrang divided ng mga Democrats, especially around we presented this to students, for example, in the US. Some of them talagang left-leaning sila, pero they don't want to vote Kamala daw because of her stance in may mga ganun single issue voters like you said. So extra challenging sa kanya because your own voter base is divided. Tapos may challenge ka pa, paano ka mag-a-appeal dun sa kabila? Na reminiscent of the Lenny campaign, if you remember. Kasi may echo chamber din siya na hindi makapasok dun sa kabilang side, kasi kahit anong gawin. That's why I think also si Kamala has been trying to penetrate that by lately nagpapa-interview siya sa Fox, trying to get into sino yung parang boundary spanner niya, who could bring me into that.
And in a controversial for some American reporters, choosing to be interviewed by podcasts.
Exactly.
Over she also does traditional media, don't get me wrong. But diba parang going to media that is, I would think, consumed by a lot of both sides, right?
Mas kasi I think she's looking for boundary spanners. Yun yung hinahanap niya. Who can take me to this network?
Right.
Kasi you don't have to speak to this base anymore. You're pretty much captured that already. Ang challenge niya talaga is going into these very insulated networks. And that's very hard because the platforms are against you. And quite literally kasi the platforms, di ba, may mga support. One of the platforms, Elon Musk, is very vocal about support.
I mean, he's a campaign surrogate. Hindi lang. I mean, like, he has campaigned for Trump. So that
so
makes it extra
medyo
difficult.
extra difficult din talaga, because even the platforms are like that. So I think yun lang, just to close it, I think it's very important to look at it as an ecosystem problem talaga. Rather than parang simplifying it. Kasi parang pag pinag-uusapan natin yan, kasi bakit ang bobo-bukas ng mga to, ganyan-ganyan, or parang parang yung pinupush natin yung burden towards the user. Na so yung response natin, fact-checking, yung response natin, education, MIL literacy, but there's something really wrong with the platform that needs to be scrutinized, studied, and really challenged.
I want to tie this back to the Philippine experience, especially because as obviously very important as the 2024 elections in a few days in the US is ilang tumbling na lang.
Tayo.
We will also be having, granted, yung midterms natin, we won't be electing a president, obviously. The highest officials will be electing our senators. But, I mean, still, it's going to be a interesting election. What are the things that we should learn from the US elections now? Or on the flip side, what are the things that they should have learned from our 2022 elections? Kasi we've made them throughout this conversation. Ang daming parallels, right? Yung inability to penetrate these little bubbles that the two sides in the 2022 case of the Philippines, the Marcos Duterte and then the Liberal Party Leni Robredo bubbles of the 2022 campaign. So what could have they learned from us, and what can we learn from them now?
Yeah. Siguro yung highlight kasi with the US experience right now is yun nga. You can already expect still very polarized digital space during the election. It's parang same siya since 2016. I don't think magbago siya, and probably even worse. And actually yung isa nga doon na sabi ko dun sa paper is I don't even think we can trust the platforms to care about information integrity anymore during elections, because ang difference mo pa nga is parang, di ba, remember the first thing that what did Mas did, the first thing he did, he tinanggal niya yung trust and safety teams niya, di ba? And then, alam mo yun, the electoral measures that were put in place before pa nga sa mga elections dati, hindi na yun, parang ang nagiging na nga mas pansin ko nga sa US election ngayon, mas brazen na yung platforms in really, hindi na sila masyado na pressure na about fixing the information integrity kasi suddenly may backers din sila. The conservative voices are supporting them and trying to keep the platforms this way. Kapag when the government tries to tackle this info in the US, lagi silang binabash na, oh, you're stifling conservative voices, etc. So suddenly I think may power also yung mga platforms to be, to stay the way they are. Hindi na sila as pressured to keep the integrity of elections safe, and up there. And then yung isa pang matututunan mo din talaga dyan, yun nga, again, we need better regulations also. More scrutiny of the platforms. Kasi yun nga, pag election, laging laging response natin ng civil society also is fact-checking, di ba? As in, very focused on content, on the specific content.
The usual na media literacy campaigns.
Wala yung mga, not just, even media literacy, di ba? Yun madalas, di ba? But it's not just that, we really have to question these platforms. So. On the flip side, I think, ang maganda naman with the Philippines, and nire-recognize nila to, the Philippines, I think, parang offers a lot of learnings to Americans kasi nauuna tayo lagi. We've had the Trump before Trump.
Terrorists.
So we've been actually ahead when it comes to research on this information. The first ones that around social media, tayo una here in the Philippines. So much, ang daming...
Intervals has a report on that, right?
Yes.
And a lot of download.
Right, and a lot of research on this information, groundbreaking research on this information came from the Philippines. I don't know kung magandang, that's a good thing. Maybe.
At least we're a cautionary tale.
Yes.
At least, hindi at least yun, no? Walang putata yun.
So, so I think naging actually important ang Pilipinas for America as a case study of what could happen to them. We're always like, kasi also para tayong kapatid ng US, we consume the same media, we consume the same, we use the same platforms, kaya para tayong mirror image nila. So what happens here usually would find its way there eventually, and vice versa. No? So there's a lot to learn in terms of how do you study and approach coordinated networks, diba? In terms of methodologies, there's a lot of studies that they can draw from na nanggaling sa Pilipinas. I hope they drew from those, but ayun. I don't know kung maganda na tayo yung source ng expertise around this information, but okay.
It's not a very, hindi siya flattering na position to be in.
We'll take it as a win, but
but at least the information is there. It's just a matter of our our counterparts in the US probably...
And a lot of campaigns have been launched here also that could be bought there. Facts for speech, verify as its own. Yung check PH campaigns, yung mga ganong approach. Magagaya nila yon. They could look at how it worked and, so many things to learn there.
On that, admittedly not hopeful, but at least foreboding, di naman. Cautionary note, thank you for joining us for Newsbreak Chats. You can download the Nerve Report in full for free. We will be dropping the link in the caption. Baka lang gusto nyo ng long read for this weekend. Let's continue the conversation. You can download the Rappler app. You'll get news straight from there. Escape the damn algorithms. If you want updates specific to the US elections, we have renamed the Security and Global Affairs channel into US Vote. You can check that out there. Thank you again, Kevin, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. This has been Beko Ping. You've been watching Newsbreak Chats under Rappler. Bye.